Hey guys, what's going on? So in today's video, we're going to talk about the next phase and the coming tier 0.5 gear, which is going to be the dungeon blues that you can get for your specific classes, and they can then get upgraded to some pretty good gear actually if you look at the stats. So we're going to talk about the Feralheart set today, which is the Druid's version of the tier 0.5 gear. Now, this is obviously intended as sort of a catch-up mechanic for classes that don't really have access to maybe raid content, or they don't want to do raid content, yet they want some better gear. So Blizzard in this phase kind of have added several catch-up mechanics. There's going to be some new gear that drops in dungeons. There's going to be, again, things like AQ20, where it's not quite as hard and you're able to get some good gear. But in Blizzard doing this, they actually introduced some gear that's pretty good if you actually take a look at it. You know, just off the top of my head, for hunters, their tier 0.5 stuff has some pretty interesting stuff on it for increasing your pet's overall damage and kind of capabilities in terms of armor and things like that. The rogue set is really interesting in the fact that you have a chance of restoring energy. And then the druid set we're going to talk about today is interesting because it actually is pretty good. It rivals the blue PvP set, which a lot of people spend time getting in order to be able to enjoy feral druids a little bit more and are able to pick up some more offensive gear. Druid's tier gear is pretty much very healing oriented. It's intellect, stamina, and plus healing. You know, you have a little bit of crit, and then your tier 1 has a little bit of spell damage, but in general, the druid's tier gear up to this point has been pretty much all focused around healing. Now, obviously, if you're on the cutting edge of raiding, you'll be going into AQ 40 somewhat soon, and then at that point, you'll be able to get some pretty nice gear that allows you to become a little bit more offensive in your playstyle. But for everyone else who is not going to be you know, in the cutting edge of raiding and in AQ 40, and you do want to get some good gear that would help you out in PvE solo farming, or also help you out in PvP, we're going to take a look at that gear today. So first off, let's just talk about aesthetics. Obviously, aesthetics is kind of a personal choice, but I really like the way this gear looks. It definitely is an upgrade over the normal dungeon blues, and getting the tier 0.5 is actually a nice achievement in and of itself, because there's not a lot of people out there that are going to bother with it. For a lot of classes, it's not a huge upgrade, but for Druid, you know, this is definitely a good looking set in my opinion, and it's going to add some really nice bonuses. So now let's talk about all the stats on this gear and why it actually is really, really nice. So firstly, let's just talk about set bonuses real fast. You guys can read most of the set bonuses. The one I want to talk about is the 4-piece, which when you're struck in combat, you have a chance of returning 300 mana, or 10 rage, or 40 energy. Obviously, this all depends on what form you're in, but this could really have a big impact in PvP, or also some farming situations in PvE. Now, obviously, it really depends on what the proc rate is, and I couldn't really find any great information online, so that part will be kind of interesting in and of itself. We'll have to see if the proc rate is really nice on this set. It might honestly be worth it to just at least wear the 4-piece for when you're in PvP situations, or, you know, out there farming in the world. Now, this is your blue PvP gear set bonuses. Now, this video is comparing the two sets, so we really have to focus on one of the strongest points of the blue PvP gear and even the epic stuff. It's the 4-piece bonus for the blue gear and the 3-piece bonus for the epic stuff, and this really just comes down to the movement speed increase from cat and bear and travel form. This is a huge reason why this gear is so good, and if you are really into PvP, especially flag running, then you're going to want to get this gear and probably spend the time getting at least the blue stuff. That's only rank 8 to get your 4-piece set bonus, but then a lot of times people will like to go to rank 10 so they can itemize with things like say the shoulder pads, which are pretty nice. That being said though, the gear when I'm comparing them, you'll see how they're very, very alike in many ways, and how one is just a little bit more offensive and the other is a little bit more defensive. So when we look at the gear of the Feralheart set, these are our totals that we get from the gear. Now, if we compare that side by side with the blue PvP set, here's what we get. Now, realize that one set is 8 pieces and the other is 6. So that obviously is going to be a huge part of, you know, your stats. But also, if you look at the two sets side by side, you can see that the Feralheart set actually gives us a lot more overall stats, which obviously as a druid we really like. Now, personally, the way I look at these two sets of gear is obviously your PvP set has your true cat and bear form stats, really high strength and agility on all of your pieces of gear, which you really want. Obviously, a good amount of stamina on all those pieces also. However, you do lack on a lot of these pieces intellect and, more importantly, spirit. Now, we already know that druid fights tend to last a long time when it comes to world PvP and even battleground PvP when you get into like a 1v1 situation. So obviously having stats that help your longevity and allow you to switch in and out of cat and bear form is going to help a lot. So having that extra intellect that you see that you get from the Feralheart is really, really impactful. And then also a big one is spirit, especially if you're playing a hybrid spec, which is very common. Obviously, Heart of the Wild NS or a Moonglow NS build is often really popular, and you're going to be taking that 15% of in-combat mana regeneration. So spirit is obviously always a nice thing, and it's also going to boost the effectiveness of your innervate when you use that. So spirit is often kind of overlooked, but it is very, very important. So personally, when I'm just looking at this gear from an outsider standpoint, and if you're going to completely min-max, picking up some of these Feralheart pieces would be really nice, especially if you're looking at pieces that you can't achieve with PvP. So you have items like a belt, bracers, things like that that you aren't getting from the PvP, from the blue stuff, that you could also, maybe take a 4-set from the Feralheart so you get the interesting 4-set bonus, and then also mix it with 4-set of your PvP gear, as then you're getting the speed increase. That is, would be the best of both worlds if you were able to do something like that. So these pieces are going to really help out in terms of someone who doesn't have the time to invest in PvP, for being able to go out there and PvP on fairly similar stat level that you would get from the blue PvP gear. And actually, in my opinion, it's going to help you in PvE more. You'll be able to pop out and heal. You'll have a greater mana pool. You're going to have a little bit more spell power, obviously, as well. And so if you're not playing a full feral DPS role, some of these pieces are really, really interesting for the implications they could have in, solo druid content that you kind of lack from the traditional tier sets that you get, because it's all focused around healing, intellect, and stamina. So just as some reference, here is a character that I made with some of this gear that you could technically do if you had both the PvP set and some of this Feralheart set. You'd be able to get the 4-set bonus of the PvP gear and of the tier 0.5 gear. Not only could you get that, you could also get the 3-piece from the AQ20 set, which for feral druids is really, really nice. Up to this point in the game, you've had no options to get really good feral druid weapons, and Mace of Ending Life is going to be one of your first that you'll have the ability to get, unless you got really, really lucky with world bosses. So this gear set would be pretty ideal for most people that didn't get to rank 14 for the PvP gear and aren't going to be getting any of the tier 2.5 stuff from AQ40 anytime soon. This would be like a really nice set of gear for PvP, and also for going out in the world and just farming and fooling around as a druid. So Hopefully this video was helpful, guys. I look forward to Phase 5. There's a lot of new content added in Phase 5. Some of the last phases we've just seen, you know, a battleground added or one raid added, but Phase 5 really does have quite a lot of content coming. So hopefully you guys are excited just as much as I am. And as always, I'll catch you in the next video. Take care.